Hello, lab experts. In today's episode of the Rock Diagnostics podcast, we're here with a medical scientist who is going to talk to us about tool creation in order to make laboratory science teams a lot more effective. So, without much further ado, let me introduce Jeffery Couchot. How are you today, Jeffrey?
Oh, I'm doing outstanding. How are you today?
I'm fine too. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Jeffrey?
Um, I've been a medical lab tech for 12 years. I've been happily married to my lovely wife named Tasha for over 20 years. And I have an 18-year-old son, and I have twins that are 8 years old.
Oh, congratulations. And tell us a little bit about your foray into medical laboratory science. How did you get acquainted with the field? How did you get into the field?
So, really interesting thing. I started off in computer networking systems,
All right.
and I was having a hard time getting a job in there. The tech bubble burst when I was getting ready to graduate. So I went to have lunch with my wife when she was working as a medical laboratory technician. And she's like, "You want to see what I do?" So she went and showed me what she did, and I'm like, "Oh, this is very interesting." She showed me like crystals in the microscope, and
Yeah.
I was fascinated with that. So I went back to school for medical laboratory technician, and
Oh.
the rest
Oh,
is
nice. You
history.
say the bubble burst. When was that? Early 2000s?
Yes, it was like
Okay.
2002, and
Okay,
so
I see.
I was trying to look for a job after I got out of the military in 2005,
All right.
and I was still having trouble finding that. And then I went back to school in 2007, graduated 2010.
That does take a lot of courage though, to decide to just go back to school and then essentially kind of restart. But I think the nice aspect about that is you're then able to use some of your computer skills to help the people in the lab a little bit more.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what we're talking about today. And
Yeah.
I've also implemented some of the logistics that I did in the military. I've also
Okay.
incorporated some of the logistics kind of things into the medical lab field as well.
That's actually that's sounds interesting. I think you can talk a little bit about that because I know here, so I'm in Benin Republic, small country in West Africa, and I think here and also in many countries around, there are lots of problems with that particular aspect, logistics. So it's not things aren't necessarily planned the way they're supposed to, and I think technical solutions would also be extremely interesting to have down here. And so, yeah, but let's talk about what you did. So you started working in what year?
I started as a medical lab technician in 2010.
Oh, all right, 2010, about 12 years ago. And when did you start seeing that there were potential inefficiencies and ways that you could try and help? Or was it while you were still studying?
Yeah, I started to see things that we could improve on just about right away. There was things like calibrations that wouldn't get done until we're like right ready to get into that lot of calibration,
Yeah.
and it could cause the potential delays to patient turnaround time in the emergency department.
What other problems is it that you could see?
Um, Supply issues, always having to borrow supplies from other labs,
Yeah.
and then by the time you get around to ordering some things, they're already on back order and things like that. So then you
Yeah.
have to borrow those from other laboratories as well.
Yeah, true. It seems like we have the same problems kind of all over the world in that case. So, for example, and even in that case, whenever you're buying, and let's say everything is done, you never know. Maybe by then the supplier tells you, no, they don't have it. And so you have to wait for it to come there. And so it makes things a lot harder when you're not planning ahead for what you're actually going to be needing. And how did you start thinking about the tools? How did you, after identifying the problem, how did you decide to start implementing the tools?
I just started to recall things that we did in the military and the logistics to make sure that we had the parts that we needed for the vehicle that were maintenance and things like that. Because I was in class 9 supply, which is vehicle maintenance parts. And
Okay.
so I just started to think of things that we did there to be ahead of the game. And I just started implementing those into the lab.
Yeah. Can you give us some ideas of how it would happen in the military?
Like so sometimes you have like a automated system where you can scan things, but in the medical field sometimes you don't have the right equipment for that, so you have to do kind of like a manual logistics system.
Yeah.
And so the system that I created in the lab was like a card system. There we would put cards in the boxes, and then whenever you got to a certain spot in that box, you would pull out the card and you would be able to put that in the key operator's mailbox, and that would let him know that he needed to calibrate the
The
new
equipment.
lot.
Yeah.
Or when he got to a certain spot in the box, we had another card, and that would allow him to know that he had to reorder that supply.
Okay, I see. So when everything would come in, you'd place the cards so that as stuff is being taken out of the lab, when you get to that point, you see the card and then you remember, okay, now it's time to do this.
Right. And I I told him that he could place those cards strategically wherever he wanted to place them, so that it gave him enough time to like reorder the next supply, or so that we would be ahead on the calibration.
Yeah. And did it ever happen that someone maybe would see the card and kind of ignore it? If that happens, then what do you do?
Yeah. We taught everybody the system, and sometimes people would ignore, and we would find the card laying somewhere, and then we'd have to like investigate. But pretty much most of the time that was just like newer people, and then
All
once
right.
we went over the system with them, pretty pretty much they received that feedback well, and they started handling the cards properly.
Did they always volunteer that it was them, or did you have to investigate for long periods of time?
Uh, we we would just like ask around, like, hey, does anybody know like what happened with this card? And then like, hey, can we show you how the system works? And people were like, oh yeah, let me know how this works, so that I don't mess up the system.
And then aside from this, so this was more quick fix. So it's something that, well, not necessarily quick, but in the sense that it's something that's relatively robust. It's easy to put in place. You have cards there, you have pens there, you can write, so anyone can do that. Now, eventually, did you try to start automating those? How did you get into that process?
So I created the cards in Excel on the computer, and then we printed them out, and they were color coded, and we got color coded construction paper to print them on, and then we laminated them so that they were reusable.
All right. Now, when it comes to the systems that you are developing, aside from that, how else were you able to sort of help out? In what other areas?
Yeah, I also create a lot of Excel spreadsheets that because everybody has like Excel or LibreOffice on their computers now, so everybody can access these calculators that I make.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one for body fluids that will automatically compare the sides for you and tell you whether they're acceptable or not, and then
Okay.
it matches with what's in Epic for what the counts are once you count
Mm-hmm.
how many sides and put in how many cells are on there. And then also the dilution factor, you can put that in and it'll change according to that.
Yeah.
I have a hematology calculator that you can go to do a platelet estimate. You can count your fields of platelets, and it tells you where to count on the top of it, and then you count your 10 fields, and it'll do your platelet estimate for you.
All
And
right.
also white blood cell estimate.
Yeah.
And then with the white blood cell estimate, you can also do your diff and put in your percentages, and it'll give you your absolute.
You said everyone can have access to that. Does that mean you have them on a website and people can go there to download it,
We
or?
have a shared drive,
Oh,
and
okay. All
everybody
right.
has access to that shared drive, so they can just click on it and
Yeah.
access those on the shared drive.
And do people use those a lot? Like, how often would you say, was it easy first? Was it easy to convince them to use the tools?
Yes, a lot of people ask me to make tools. They're one because they've seen the tools that I've made. So usually I just get the idea from somebody else to go ahead and make this tool, the next tool, once
Yeah.
they've seen like one of the tools that I've made.
So I think you kind of have the opposite problem that that I had down here. I did make a couple of those small tools in Word using VBA for Word, some in Excel. But the opposite problem I had here was that it was actually more complicated to get people to actually use the tools because they were used to the old methods. And so what I realized is that in my case, it was usually easier to just start using the tools and just do my work much faster. And then eventually they'll come and ask me, okay, how do I use this tool? Because it just made things a lot easier. When you get the idea, how do you tend to decide what software you're going to use or what solution you're going to use to solve the problem? So for example, using the card system, that for example is something I probably wouldn't have thought about because my first idea would have been to go and try and do something more complicated, like using maybe Excel or something of that nature. When you said it, then that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's a card system. The cards are there. You just write it. You put it in the right place. So it's at the right place at the right time when it's needed. So how do you
Yeah.
usually go about deciding?
Also, my thought behind that was that techs are usually busy, and if they're like, well, I'm in the middle of dealing with all this ER stuff right now, and I don't have enough time to like write an email or anything like that.
Yeah,
So, but pulling a card out of a box takes like 1 second,
exactly.
and and then and you put the mailbox or whatever in between where they grab the card and where they're going to put the reagent on, so that they don't have to go out of their way to put the card wherever they're putting it. It's
Yeah,
like
I
on
see.
their way.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's already there. It's already on the way. No need to do too much thinking. You know what happens. Probably they're already cards are self-explanatory, so you know exactly what to do, and you've already
Oh, and
seen them a while.
yeah, and we had Cap come in and inspect, and they was asking about our card system, and they wanted to talk to me about how they could implement their own card system at their location.
Now, all the tools that you've put in place, aside from using them within your lab, is there like in the future, do you think it's going to be open to the public, whether open source or sold, or like, did you ever think of maybe trying to have it disseminated to other places?
Um, well, I don't know about selling it. I like right now, just talking to you, other people could come out and implement their own kind of ideas and systems. That's what this
Yeah,
whole chat's about, is like trying to find ways that other places could also have innovative ideas to come out with things and
yeah.
improve their team.
Yeah, I think that's actually quite interesting because it's going to give ideas to people. Like someone, for example, here who has problems with logistics, that's something that's going to be helpful because it facilitates things. It doesn't, many of the tools that you've developed don't require necessarily a lot of investment aside from time. You take your time, you sit down, you think things through, you plan it, and then you try to execute. Now, there are some techs that will complain about, you said it earlier, the time. In some situations, they don't necessarily. So, for example, you come to your storage room, right? You see the card. That does require you to still remember later to go and alert the right people in order to actually get everything purchased so that your stock can be replenished. So how do you deal with that particular aspect? What tends to happen?
So when we train people, we teach them the system now. And the card itself is the alert to the key operator that he needs to
Oh,
reorder
I
that
see.
supply or do the calibration. So there's no need to email him now because he knows where to go to get the card. So
Yeah.
it saves time on shooting out that email.
But so if I understand correctly, I come to the storage room, I get maybe a box of a reagent, I see the card, I leave with the reagent and the card, and then I drop the cards maybe in the office or on the desk of whoever is in charge of purchasing. Is that it?
Right. Or you could create like a basket, or you could put a basket out or something that's in between, just so and wherever the key operator for that instrument it would be able to know to go and get it. But I like to keep it between wherever you're getting the supply and wherever you're going to be loading it, just
Mm-hmm.
so that it's more convenient for the person.
Okay, I see. Unfortunately, we hadn't prepared to show how any of the tools work, but maybe if you're interested, some other time we could grab one that you like and maybe redo this, and then you'll show us approximately how they work.
Yes, I could do that.
What's the most popular tool what's the one that people are most happy to use?
We have a checklist for every shift, and the checklist change depending on like what day it is. So like Wednesday maintenance doesn't show up unless we have our weekly, unless it's Wednesday, and then we are all of our weekly maintenance will show up on there. And then
Yeah.
whenever monthly maintenance is due, monthly maintenance will show up on the checklist, but the rest of the time it doesn't show up on the checklist. And I also build all those in Excel, and I put like conditional formatting on there where it'll look for whatever day it is of the week, and then it'll change according to what day of the week it is or what day of the
All
month it
right.
is.
But what are some of the most popular tools in general?
Um, they they seem to really
It
like
varies.
most of the tools that I make. Yeah,
Okay.
and I also update forms and recreate forms in the lab as well.
And is there anyone you're thinking of making next? What's in the plans?
Yeah, the body fluid one that I was describing earlier, that's more of a recent thing because we ran into an issue where the we had a body fluid cap survey that just came out, and we had recently we had our supervisor had recently got a different job, so we're like in the middle of changing supervisors,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't know how to order the body fluid survey in Epic. So I went in there and I used the QC to figure out what the formula was for the what Epic was calculating for the white cells and stuff like that. And then I made that based off of what was going on in Epic because we couldn't put the body fluid cap survey into Epic.
Yeah. So
So that's kind of how I get ideas. Sometimes it's just something comes up,
yeah.
and all of a sudden I just create something because
Yeah.
of a
So
scenario that comes up.
yeah, there's a problem and then you try to figure out the solution. It's one of the things that we try and get more people to do down here. It's not always easy, but because, well, I think one problem we have down here is that we are usually, so for example, when we take our students, and let's say they're having a final year project, usually we have to sort of steer them towards trying to solve problems that are down here, because what will tend to happen, of course, they're young, so they see what's happening in other places and they see the cool stuff and they want to do the cool stuff, but sometimes it's easier to just come back and then look at the problems you have around you and then just focus on those, because those help people around you are probably going to help you, are probably going to make your life a lot easier, make the lives of the people that are around you a lot easier. So I really like the approach you took to this by trying to make things as simple as possible to solve the problem in the most straightforward and efficient manner, which is what we really need in medical settings, because of course, time is extremely important. The more time you can save, the more time there is to spend doing other things too. So in general, do you have any last words for anyone watching this?
Uh, just think logically on what kind of tools that you could make for your laboratories, what kind of innovative ideas you have.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for taking the time to share with us today. Hopefully, very soon we'll be able to have a small session where we'll look at one of your tools and go into some more detail on how it works. And lab experts, you heard it, try to solve problems around you as easily and as efficiently as you can. It's going to help you. It's going to help people around you, make your lives a lot easier. Thanks a lot for being here with us today. And hopefully we see you next time to talk more MedLab.
It's nice being on your program. Thank you.